And I want you to tell parents and warn them, in the cases we've seen ourselves, sometimes the doctors didn't have the child's best interest in mind, told the parents nothing's wrong, wait a few years, everything will be okay, and in a few years everything wasn't okay.
Doctors do that. And it's not because necessarily they're evil or they're bad. Sometimes they really believe what they're saying is accurate. Sometimes they're not as interested. Sometimes they're having a bad day. Doctors are human beings. So they're working as best they can, but sometimes they can miss it. The best indicator for your child is the parent, is yourself. You're the one looking at your child every single day. You're the one watching how they advance. This is the same thing as the child gets older. When the child's in preschool and the child's in grade school, first, second, third, fourth grade. You can have doctors saying the child's fine, but the doctor's seeing the child for an hour or 2 hours for a 4-month or 6-month period. What's the better indicator? When you go to the parents? When you go to with the daycare providers? When you go to the teachers? When you go to the schools? When you see what's going on? This is where you find out. When you go to other parents who've been watching your child with you, those are the people who see the child day in and day out and can say, this child is experiencing difficulties. And it's so important, because if a child starts out believing that he or she is dumb, or starts out believing that he or she is different, or that he or she just can't mix or interact with people, or he or she is a bad person because they act out, and doesn't learn a different way of dealing with that, and doesn't know that that's not because it's them, it's because of an injury or trauma they've experienced, then that child is going to have problems the rest of his or her life.
I've seen you go to middle schools, for example. I've seen you request the records, get the records, and for the first 5 years of educational life in a child, the reports are great. And then for the next year, after the trauma or injury, they have all kinds of delinquencies, truancies, and acting out problems.
That's exactly right. A child, and a lot of people will say, well, that's the development of a child, because that happens. Don't think it doesn't happen. Sometimes children that have no traumas, that have no problems, turn from being the most loving, gracious, wonderful child in school to being a holy terror in class. But a lot of times that can still be determined to originate from some source. But if the child's been injured, has experienced a trauma of some type, and now is acting out or is turned into this completely different person, maybe from being a very active child to being a recluse, to where the child won't do anything. He or she just refuses to become involved. These are classic symptoms. And yes, sometimes even teachers, because now the child's being good, the child's back here not causing any problems, so they don't rock the boat. Sometimes it takes you actually going to school, sitting in the back, and watching how the child acts. Going to school, talk to the teachers, and finding out how the child acts, but you must get the reports, because the 4th grade teacher is not the 5th grade teacher. The 5th grade teacher is not the 6th grade teacher. So the 5th grade teacher may not be reading the reports from the 4th grade teacher. So you don't even know anything's different. You can't find it out, because the teacher's going, well, I didn't know how he was in 4th or 3rd or 2nd grade. You have to go find it out. It takes review and research.
So in this virtual injury seminar, the news and point we want to drive home to the parents is there are ways to prove your child's been injured. There's ways to do it, sophisticated ways. There's ways to do it through doctor specialties, and there's the ways to do it through school and observing your own child.
And this is on physical injuries also. Don't sell short a physical injury. A broken arm, a significant break, or a broken leg, broken hips, they can affect a child's development. Damage to a shoulder. Sometimes if it's not properly treated, or even if it is properly treated, sometimes it can affect the growth and the development of that part of the child's body, to where the child will experience difficulties for the rest of his or her life, or will at least need some kind of care.
So when dealing with children like adults, you need to know if you're going to settle or obtain compensation now, what the future holds for that person.
Remember something about children. Normally, you don't have to rush as much. The statute of limitations is extended. So the statute of limitations doesn't even run right away for a child because the child, unless, of course, a guardian is appointed. So you have to be careful. And that's why it's important that if your child's been injured, you get a hold of a lawyer right away and ask that lawyer, what's the statute of limitations for my child?
But even though the statute of limitations may be extended, sometimes the proof of, let's say, a car accident, the witnesses, the police officer, the people who can prove what happened go away.
Oh, excellent. Excellent point. And that's one of the things you have to make sure you're aware of. If you're going to wait 3, 4, 5 years to pursue the case to see how your child develops or is able to overcome the injury, then you have to get somebody, an investigator, a lawyer, best you have a lawyer overseeing it, that sits down and helps gather the evidence and preserve the evidence. Otherwise, what you're doing is 4 years later, when you find out the child has a significant injury, you can't find the person that caused it. You don't even know where they're at. They could be out of the country. They could be somewhere else. And if you haven't protected yourself, now you've got a problem because you have no place to seek your remedy.
So sometimes you do have to move quickly with regard to children.
You move quickly with regard to caring for the child and with regard to stabilizing the evidence. You don't have to move quickly with respect to filing a lawsuit. You want to measure that and determine when and where and how you want to address the lawsuit. But as to everything else, yes, you need to be on top of that immediately.
But there are ways to protect children.
Absolutely.